February 26, 1943, northern Tunisia. War has a sound, and on this day it wasn't gunfire. It wasn't artillery. It was something worse, a metallic thunder rolling across the desert like the arrival of a mechanical god of war, cold, unfeeling, unstoppable. Staff Sergeant William "Red" McConnell of the U.S. 1st Armored Division felt it before he heard it, a vibration crawling under the sand, into the bones. Engines don't make you afraid. This one did. Through the smoke and broken olive trees, he saw a shadow move, bigger than anything he had seen in North Africa. Too big to be real. Red raised his binoculars. What he saw didn't make sense. "Jesus," Red whispered. "Before we continue, quick question for you watching. If you were in Red's position, behind that gun, facing this monster for the first time, what would you do? Fight or run? Tell me in the comments right now, because this battle will prove who was truly brave and who lied about it after the war. And if you love real World War II history, the kind they don't sanitize in textbooks, hit subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapter of this war. All right, back to Tunisia. It moved into view like a steel beast, 11 feet tall, 70,000 pounds of armored defiance. Its turret swung, not in panic like most tanks, but slow, confident, like a predator that knows the kill already belongs to it. A long 88mm gun protruded from the turret, longer than anything the Americans had seen. This wasn't a Panzer IV, not a Stu G. This thing didn't fear anything. "Red, what is that?" Corporal Harris cracked over the intercom, voice trembling. "I don't know," Red muttered, "but that ain't friendly." And just like that, without a declaration or warning, the Tiger I had entered the war. Radio chatter exploded. "Unknown German heavy. Armor can't penetrate. Repeat, can't penetrate. We need reinforcements now." Sherman crews scrambled into firing lines. Red slammed inside his turret. "Load a P. A PUP." He fired first. The armor-piercing round screamed across the desert and hit dead center on the Tiger's front plate. Clang. No penetration. Just sparks. What the hell? He fired again. Miss. Then, boom. The Tiger fired back. A single shot. A single American tank vanished in a column of fire. And, for the first time since the war began, U.S. tank crews felt something they had never felt against the Germans before. Fear. The blast sent shards of rock and metal hammering against them as they backed down into a wadi for cover. They survived. Barely. Back at battalion headquarters, American tankers had no name for what they had just encountered. Reports flooded in. New German heavy tank, frontal armor invulnerable, 88mm high-velocity gun, accurate at over a mile. Intelligence officers were skeptical. The Germans, they argued, liked deception. Maybe crews had misidentified a modified Panzer IV. Maybe the panic of battle inflated rumors. But the casualty lists told another story. Shermans were dying at unprecedented ranges. Then came Kasserine Pass. The first major clash between German and American armor in World War II had already been brutal. But now the Tiger appeared in growing numbers. Units of Schwer Panzerabteilung 501, German Heavy Panzer Battalion 501, moved with terrifying lethality. They struck like sledgehammers, smashing American armor columns before pulling back, invincible ghosts in gray. But, despite this battlefield dominance, the Tiger had a secret weakness, one so embarrassing that the Germans hid it from Allied intelligence, a weakness so crippling that it would eventually help cost Germany the war. And the Americans were about to discover it, by accident. March 6, 1943. Jebel Jadidiyah, Tunisia. Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Turk of Heavy Panzer Battalion 501 was furious. His Tiger tank, tactical number 712, had broken down again. The Maybach HL-230 engine had overheated during a forced march, and the gearbox locked up. Worst of all, they were out of fuel. Again. "Verdammt!" Turk shouted as he kicked the Tiger's hull. The tank had guzzled nearly 150 gallons just maneuvering through rough terrain. Ridiculous fuel use, but there was no way around it. The Tiger's massive 57-ton frame strained the engine constantly. Even on good roads, she couldn't travel more than 120 miles on a full tank, less than half the operational range of a Sherman. Now, stranded in the hills, Turk's crew had no choice. They set scuttling charges to blow the tank rather than let it fall into Allied hands. But before they could finish, American artillery rained down. Turk and his crew bailed out, fleeing on foot under fire. They reached German lines, but their Tiger did not. The Americans had just captured Tiger 712, almost completely intact. They didn't know it yet, but this tank would expose the myth of Nazi engineering superiority. It would travel across the Atlantic. It would be torn apart, studied, and tested. It would reveal that Germany's most feared tank, the tank that terrorized Allied crews, was also one of its greatest strategic failures. Because while the Tiger dominated battlefields, it couldn't outrun math. And in modern war, logistics, not legends, decide victory. Tiger 712 was quietly shipped to a secret facility in Maryland, under the control of U.S. Ordnance and the Aberdeen Proving Ground Testing Command. There, in the spring of 1943, American engineers would discover something shocking, something that would change the course of armored warfare forever. And it all started when they opened the Tiger's fuel tanks. April 18, 1943. Aberdeen, Proving Ground, Maryland. A cold Atlantic wind blew across the tarmac as Colonel George B. Jarrett, Director of Foreign Materiel Intelligence, stood before the hulking Tiger WAM. Around him, a team of engineers, mechanics, and armor specialists circled the machine like surgeons preparing for an autopsy. "Gentlemen," Jarrett announced, "this is the first intact German heavy tank to reach U.S. soil. Treat it with respect. This thing has killed a lot of our boys." Cameras clicked, clipboards scribbled. The massive German cross was still visible on the turret. The technicians looked tense, almost nervous, to approach it. Someone muttered, "Looks like a bank vault on wheels." Another replied, "Yeah, one with a cannon." Before any testing could begin, they had to get it running. The German Maybach engine was drained of fuel and coolant during transport, and pieces of the gearbox had been damaged by shrapnel in Tunisia. But the Americans had a secret weapon of their own: reverse engineering. German engineering was supposed to be genius, precision, perfection. But as Aberdeen mechanics tore into the engine bay, they found something else. "Good God," one mechanic grunted, wiping grease from his hands. "This thing's a nightmare to work on." The layout was cramped. Bolts were over-torqued. Access panels were poorly designed. Fuel lines were buried behind armor plates that had to be removed for even basic servicing. "It's powerful," Chief Engineer John McShane noted, "but it's over-engineered." They built it like a peacetime luxury car, not a wartime machine. Even Jarrett frowned. It looks like they built this thing assuming they'd have time to maintain it, assuming they'd have fuel. Once operational, Tiger 712 rumbled to life with a deep, thunderous growl. Black smoke belched from its exhaust stacks. Observers shielded their ears as the engine roared under load. Testing began with armor trials. U.S. engineers fired captured 75mm PaK-40 shells and 76mm armor-piercing rounds at plates sliced from the Tiger's armor. The results were conclusive. Frontal armor was nearly invincible at long range. Side armor? Still thick enough to shrug off Sherman shells. In combat, it meant that American tank crews had only two real options: get close or get behind it. Both statistically led to death. The Tiger's battlefield reputation was no myth. This thing was terrifying. But then came the mobility trials, and everything changed. Tiger 712 was fueled, 534 liters, or 141 U.S. gallons, and sent on to Ardennes vehicle course, a straight-line 25-mile road test. No combat weight, no battlefield stress. An hour in, McShane leaned in toward Jarrett. "Sir, we've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The fuel gauge." "What about it?" "It's already down to a quarter tank." Jarrett blinked. That can't be right. But it was. By the end of 25 miles, the Tiger had burned through more than half its fuel. At that rate, on clean highways with no combat maneuvers, the Tiger would run dry at roughly 120 miles. On rough ground, that dropped to 60 miles. Add combat conditions, rapid gear changes, traversing guns, turret power draw, and that number fell to 30 miles. 30 miles per tank. Colonel Jarrett looked like he'd been struck in the chest. "How is this possible?" he muttered, reviewing the data. "This thing uses fuel like a bomber." McShane shook his head. "More than a bomber, sir. Fuel consumption is 6 gallons per mile under combat load. The Wehrmacht couldn't keep this thing supplied if they tried." One officer laughed darkly. "The best way to stop a Tiger isn't armor-piercing ammo. It's a fuel shortage." The laughter died quickly, replaced with silence. They had just realized what this meant. The Tiger wasn't a weapon. It was a logistical suicide note. Engine technician reports grew harsher by the day. Transmission failure likely within 500 miles. Final drive housing prone to fracture under stress. Overheating frequent. Fan system underpowered. Repair times unacceptable for field maintenance. Fuel capacity inadequate for operational mobility. This wasn't a war machine built for global conflict. This was a showpiece, the engineering equivalent of a sledgehammer made of gold. Powerful, heavy, and completely impractical. Aberdeen filed a classified conclusion. Tiger demonstrates significant battlefield lethality, but cannot be deployed or sustained on large fronts due to fuel and maintenance demands. Strategically flawed. Jarrett closed the report. In that moment, he realized something profound. The Tiger had already destroyed German armored doctrine, not because of Allied tanks, but because it forced Hitler to fight a war he could not afford to supply. The Tiger didn't lose to Shermans. It lost to logistics. But the Tiger story didn't end in North Africa, or even in the testing fields of Maryland. Because a year later, on the frozen roads of Belgium, the Tiger would run out of fuel again, this time in the middle of a battle that could have changed the war. December 16, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow fell in thick silence over the pine-covered hills as German armor rolled west in the last major offensive Hitler would ever launch. The attack was bold, insane even, a surprise assault designed to split the Allied lines and capture the Belgian port of Antwerp. Hitler called it Operation Watch on the Rhine. The world would remember it as the Battle of the Bulge. At the spearhead was one of Germany's most famous armored formations, Kampfgruppe Peiper, led by the hardened SS commander Joachim Peiper. Alongside his Panther tanks and armored half-tracks, Peiper commanded a number of Tiger I and Tiger II tanks, armored giants meant to smash through the American lines like steel wolves tearing into sheep. Instead, they froze to death in the snow. Before the battle even began, Peiper's headquarters received a quiet warning from logistical officers. Fuel supply insufficient for sustained advance beyond 48 hours. Peiper ignored it. Orders from Hitler were clear: push west at all costs. The assault began with shocking success. The Americans, caught off guard, fell back under brutal artillery and armored thrusts. Roads choked with burning jeeps and trucks. Prisoners were captured by the hundreds. And, once again, U.S. tank crews reported the same terrifying sight: Tigers advancing through forest roads, shrugging off fire. But the Tigers were already dying. Their engines struggled in the winter cold. The thick, viscous fuel froze inside fuel lines at night. Mechanics used blowtorches and campfires just to heat engines enough to turn over, and fuel trucks were nowhere to be found. December 18th, Belgian High Ridge near La Glaise. SS Untersturmführer Hans Brunn stopped his Tiger II on a narrow road lined with wrecked vehicles. "Why are we stopping?" the loader asked. "We're out." "Out of what?" Brunn just stared at the fuel gauge. Empty. The rest of the company halted one by one. Panther tanks idled helplessly. Half-tracks sat useless in ditches. Peiper's spearhead had broken through American lines, but now sat stranded in hostile territory, engines silent. Tigers were supposed to be unstoppable, but they couldn't move an inch without fuel. Nearby villages, Stavelot, Trois Ponts, La Glaise, became hunting grounds as German tank crews raided American fuel dumps and civilian barns looking for gasoline. Desperate Tiger commanders siphoned fuel from burning Sherman wrecks. Some crewmen even hijacked American fuel trucks, switching uniforms on the battlefield to get close. It wasn't enough. On December 22nd, Peiper's force was completely surrounded. The Tigers, too heavy to abandon, became dead iron fortresses. Crews destroyed them with explosives. More Tigers were lost to fuel starvation in 1 week than to enemy fire. The truth was undeniable now. Hitler's supertanks weren't war-winning weapons. They were traps. Each Tiger required 8 gallons of fuel per mile in winter combat, engine overhaul every 500 miles, 100 man-hours of maintenance every 10 hours of operation, 2 recovery vehicles just to tow it if disabled. If one broke down, the entire column had to stop or leave it behind. Peiper's retreat on foot through the Belgian snow marked the end of the Tiger's legend. Not in glory, not in victory, but in exhaustion, hunger, and abandonment. And as Peiper's men fled, American intelligence would uncover an even darker truth. Germany had never had the fuel to operate its fleet of Tigers. Not in North Africa, not in Normandy, not in the Ardennes. The Tiger had killed thousands of Allied soldiers, but it had also killed Germany's chance at victory by bleeding the Reich dry, and the men who built it knew it. In the spring of 1945, deep in Allied custody, the chief designer of the Tiger tank, Erwin Aders of Henschel, finally spoke. What he said would shock Allied interrogators. May 12, 1945, Mondorf-les-Bains, Luxembourg. The war in Europe was over. In a converted luxury hotel called Ashcan, now a temporary high-security interrogation center for Nazi leadership, Allied officers sat across from a quiet, exhausted engineer in a wrinkled gray suit. His name was Erwin Aders, chief designer of the Tiger I at Henschel. His steel-rimmed glasses reflected the lamps overhead as he stared at a printed report on the table. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Tiger 712 Assessment. He had already read it twice. Now he lowered the report and looked up. It is accurate. Across from him, U.S. Ordnance Colonel James Hollings leaned forward. So, you admit the Tiger had catastrophic fuel inefficiency? Aders folded his hands. Catastrophic is your word, Colonel. We preferred the term operationally demanding. So, why build it? Hollings pressed. Why design a tank that can barely drive 100 miles without draining half of Germany's oil? Aders drew a slow breath. Because we were ordered to. He explained everything. In 1941, the German Army Weapons Agency issued a requirement for a new heavy breakthrough tank. Originally, Henschel proposed a 45-ton design. Still heavy, but mobile and practical. But then Ferdinand Porsche, Hitler's favorite engineer, entered the competition with an overpowered electric drive prototype. Hitler was mesmerized by Porsche's tank and demanded Henschel redesign theirs to match its size and armor. That is when everything changed, Aders said coldly. The Tiger was never meant to weigh 57 tons. It was forced to. By Hitler, Hollings said. Yes, he wanted a hammer to crush the Soviet Union. He believed superior engineering could win the war alone. Logistics were ignored. Aders admitted what Aberdeen engineers already suspected. The Tiger's fuel consumption had been a known problem during design. We warned the High Command it would need fuel that Germany did not have, Aders said. They told us victory in Russia would solve the fuel problem. He paused. It did not. The interrogators pressed deeper. Why didn't Henschel redesign it? Reduce weight? Change the engine? Wasn't the Tiger too complex to mass produce? Aders didn't flinch. The Tiger was not designed for mass production. It was a prestige weapon, a weapon of fear. He explained how production was slowed by shortages of machine tools and hardened steel, how Tigers were built by hand, not on assembly lines like Shermans or T-34s, how each Tiger took 300,000 man-hours to manufacture, 6 times that of a Sherman. It was madness, he said softly. We were fighting a total war with boutique weapons. But the most shocking truth came last. Tell us, Hollings said, what was the Tiger's true kill ratio? Aders adjusted his glasses. In open combat, with proper crew, 2 Tigers could destroy a company of Shermans. Hollings frowned. Then, why did you lose? Aders looked tired now. Not defensive, not bitter, just defeated. We did not lose to your tanks, Colonel, he said. We lost to your factories, your fuel, your trucks, your railroads. You built a war machine. We built a monument. He tapped the Aberdeen report once more. The Tiger did not fail in battle. It failed in purpose. It could win fights, but it could not win a war. Outside the interrogation room, Colonel Hollings closed the file and turned to his adjutant. "Send the report to Washington," he said, "and get this one classified." Logistics just won the tank war story, but no one's going to believe it. The Tiger's legacy was sealed, not by explosions, not by armor, but by fuel. Yet there was one more chapter left, one buried in the technical notes at Aberdeen, a final twist that few historians ever talk about. Because when U.S. engineers finished testing Tiger 712, they didn't just walk away. They rebuilt it. They changed it. And what they discovered next would shape the future of tank design forever. After the war, the Tiger was dismissed by many as a fear weapon, a brute machine that dazzled soldiers but doomed German strategy. But at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, no one underestimated it. They had seen what it could do. They had measured its power and its weaknesses, and they wanted to know something no battlefield report could answer. What if the Tiger had been built right? July 2nd, 1943. Aberdeen, Proving Ground, Maryland. The disassembly of Tiger 712 was complete. Every panel removed, every bolt logged, every system photographed and studied. But now came Phase 2, American optimization. Chief Engineer John McShane held the Tiger's gearbox diagram and shook his head. "Bad design, great concept," he muttered. "We can fix this." His team began modifying Tiger 712, not to preserve it for a museum, but to extract engineering lessons. The suspension? Overcomplicated, but incredibly stable. The 88mm KWK-36 gun? A masterpiece, deadly accurate even beyond 1,500 meters. The armor layout? Too vertical, but made from extremely high-quality steel. The engine bay? A mechanic's worst nightmare. "We're not here to mock the Germans," McShane said to the team. "We're here to learn from them." Statement of Improvement. Aberdeen Testing Division Report. The final mechanical report on Tiger 712 didn't simply criticize, it recommended improvements. System original Tiger design. U.S. engineering proposal. Transmission. Frequent failure under stress. Simplify gear ratios and improve cooling. Engine. Maybach HL230, 690 horsepower. Replace with high-torque V12 diesel. Fuel range. 120 miles on road, 30 in combat. Increase to minimum 250 miles. Turret traverse. Slow hydraulic. Faster powered traverse system. Maintenance. Extremely difficult. Modular design for rapid field repairs. American engineers weren't impressed by German overengineering. They wanted wartime practicality. Tanks had to be serviceable under fire, reliable in mud and snow, simple enough to maintain by 19-year-olds with wrenches. The Tiger hadn't been built for war, but what came next would be. Legacy of the Tiger. The real impact. Many people today think the Tiger was a failure because it lost the war. But every engineer at Aberdeen knew the truth. The Tiger changed tank warfare forever. Its lessons shaped 3 generations of U.S. and NATO tanks. The high-velocity gun and long-range optics, adopted in the M26 Pershing. The heavy sloped armor concept, refined in the M48 Patton. The stabilization tech and fire control system, perfected in the M60. And when the U.S. built the M1 Abrams, it used the ultimate Tiger lesson. Mobility plus firepower plus logistics win wars. The Abrams could dominate at long range like a Tiger, but move like a Sherman and refuel like a modern army. Every component was modular, easy to maintain, built for mass production and field repair. The Tiger was a monster. The Abrams was a system. That difference wins wars. In the end, Tiger 712 didn't just die as a captured enemy tank. It became a teacher, a brutal, beautiful relic of impossible engineering. And inside its torn armor and shattered gears, it carried a final warning. Power means nothing without fuel. Firepower means nothing without logistics. Engineering greatness means nothing if it cannot endure war. The Tiger didn't lose to better tanks. The Tiger lost to history. Legacy of the Tiger, the real impact. Many people today think the Tiger was a failure because it lost the war. But every engineer at Aberdeen knew the truth. The Tiger changed tank warfare forever. Its lessons shaped 3 generations of U.S. and NATO tanks, the high-velocity gun and long-range optics, adopted in the M26 Pershing, the heavy sloped armor concept, refined in the M48 Patton, the stabilization tech and fire control system, perfected in the M60, and when the U.S. built the M1 Abrams, it used the ultimate Tiger lesson. Mobility plus firepower plus logistics win wars. The Abrams could dominate at long range like a Tiger, but move like a Sherman and refuel like a modern army. Every component was modular, easy to maintain, built for mass production and field repair. The Tiger was a monster. The Abrams was a system. That difference wins wars. In the end, Tiger 712 didn't just die as a captured enemy tank, it became a teacher, a brutal, beautiful relic of impossible engineering. And inside its torn armor and shattered gears, it carried a final warning. Power means nothing without fuel. Firepower means nothing without logistics. Engineering greatness means nothing if it cannot endure war. The Tiger didn't lose to better tanks. The Tiger lost to history.